Are you leery about participating in scientific research because you just don't know what the powers that be will do with your information? Or maybe you're sitting on the fence about providing sensitive information about yourself just for the sake of science. Well, today we are going to have a discussion about something that is both controversial but necessary about how scientific advances are stifled for people of African descent and how we need to start showing up for research efforts we believe in that are led by people we trust. My name is Dr. Crystal Porter, and I'm a hair scientist and owner of Main Insights, a company that conducts scientific research and focuses on the hair needs of people from African descent. This platform is designed to elevate the Black hair care industry and empower consumers and hair professionals with education that is both driven and certified by scientific research. Now, many of you already know my background, but for those of you who don't, I want to just give a little history about who I am and where I came from. So, my first job from grad school was at Unilever, and I worked in the laboratory that was helping with claim substantiation. So, basically, trying to understand how the products affected the hair quality. And I left there after 2.5 years and then joined L'Oreal because they had a Institute for Ethnic Hair and Skin Research in Chicagoland. And it's the place where I spent the majority of my years in corporate America. And there, my world just was, it was fascinating because who wouldn't want to work on hair that's specific to what I personally relate to, right? So my daughters both have hair of African descent, my mom, my friends. And so, just finding out about yourself is like really awesome. And so I spent over 10 and a half years there. And now I've been in the field for 22 years now, but after I left L'Oreal, I decided to go out on my own, but continue to do research. It really is a passion because one thing that I learned is that all hair is not created equal, and there are more questions than there are answers. And so when I left L'Oreal and went to Chicago State University, which is my alma mater, I was bombarded with a lot of students who really wanted to know about hair because they knew what my background was. And so I decided that it would be great to provide opportunities for students in that area. And so more work needs to be done, and I'm very passionate about it. Now, I have scientific peers who will actually stand up in conferences and say with a lot of confidence that besides the geometry and the degree of curl for people of African descent, that hair is just hair and nothing is really different. And I've studied enough hair over the years to know that that definitely is not true. And so the research that I do now is in collaboration with hair practitioners to better understand how our lifestyle affects our hair and scalp health. So there are a lot of ethnic groups out there. Those of African descent are the ones that's least satisfied with the condition of their hair. And that's really illustrated by us spending all the money that we do on hair care products because we're not satisfied and we are not happy. So it's time for us to stop making do and actually do something because hair care has evolved with years of research on other hair types, mainly Caucasian and Asian hair, but we are missing, and I want to dig deeper as to why that is. Now, before I do that, I would love to know who is out there with me this morning. Let me know who you are and where you're from. So I see we have Taria here. Thank you. Great day. Yes, thank you so much. And I would love to know, what your background is. So if you are a practitioner, a hair practitioner, either a stylist or a barber, put the number one. If you are a consumer, put the number two. And if you are a researcher or scientist like myself, put the number three. And Taria is from St. Thomas. Awesome. Number two, consumer. Great. Now, I oftentimes ask you to like and share. So if you are on YouTube, definitely give me a thumbs up and subscribe. But for this particular episode that we're having, I would love for you to share. And the reason why I want you to share is because this information is really important when it comes to Black people in particular. And so it's important for you to share this because I think we need to have more discussions about what's going on and the frustrations that we have as a community. But before we get there, I want to say now, if you are frustrated with the lack of information available when it comes to caring for your hair and you've wasted a lot of money, time, and resources just trying to figure things out on your own, that's one of the reasons why we're here in the first place. So we have created the Our Black Hair Matters movement, and I have put together a new resource called Finding the Right Stylist. And this was based on feedback that I've gotten from watchers or viewers who said, hey, you talk about it's important for us to be with the right professionals. So how do I even know? So finding the right stylist is there. And you can go to links.maininsights.com/right stylist. And you should see that in the ticker below. So speaking of right stylists, if you have a pressing concern and you need to have a conversation, my team is standing by, and this team is vetted. And so when I say finding the right stylist, is really with them in mind. And so you can schedule a complimentary 15-minute call by going to links.maininsights.com/APPT. All right. So, hi, Samal. Thank you for joining. And you're from LinkedIn, a student and a consumer. Yeah, thanks for letting me know. So for those of you who are just joining us, welcome to the Our Black Hair Matters lunchtime chat. And our topic for today is controversial but necessary: contributions in science and participating in Black hair research. I am Dr. Crystal Porter, and I want to discuss why we don't participate in scientific research and how that is really to our detriment. So I want to start off with documented reasons why we don't participate in studies. And so in 2020, there was research done by Genentech, which is a biotech company, and they wanted to know why a lot of Blacks aren't participating in research, because as a biotech company, they would like to have representation from all of the community. And they found out that less than 15% of people were Black. And so they were like, okay, why is this? And so some of their findings was, the first one is Black people don't believe we are treated fairly. And so I would love to know if you have any experience with that, feeling that when you go to a physician or you're placed in an atmosphere with others who you may perceive are have expertise that you just aren't too familiar with yourself, or have knowledge that you're not familiar with yourself, that you may feel that you're being taken advantage of. Now, the other thing that they said is that we feel misunderstood. And I definitely can relate to that for sure. The other thing is the system is out to get us. And when it comes to like COVID-19 and the studies that they wanted to do on the vaccine, that was, I believe, the number one reason, was that people felt that the system is out there to get us, that we would be targeted as a population. And then that leads to the fourth reason, which is closely related, and that is the lack of trust. We don't have a lot of trust in people who are poking us, getting blood from us, or any other types of medical related situations. And so I'm curious, is there anyone who can relate to that? Put in R for relate, because I know I definitely can relate, especially when you hear about the history of what's going on, what has gone on with our people, right? And so everyone, I believe, has heard of the Tuskegee Experiments. And that is when the US government funded research to understand syphilis. But what they did is they promised Black men that they were going to get help for the disease and ended up just letting the disease play out. And they wanted to know, what happens when syphilis is untreated. And so just the horrific things that happen in terms of the men becoming blind or having psychosis and mental problems. I mean, there are a lot of horrific things that resulted from that. So there are some legitimate reasons why we aren't trusting. So now Taria says, yes, there's been a huge distrust in science in the Black community, and rightfully so, yes. Samai says that R, she can relate. And then as someone on Facebook, it comes up as Facebook user. So I apologize for not being able to say your name, but you can relate as well. So yeah, I understand. Now, this rings a bell because most women have had pelvic exams. And so the physician who is known as the father of gynecology, he goes by the name, or he was James Marion Sims. And just hearing about how he, in my opinion, tortured a lot of the slaves just to figure out how to manipulate the reproductive system and to study it and to try to understand how to supposedly help people or women in particular who had problems in their pelvic region. And so he is the one who invented the speculum. I often call them bird beaks when you go and get your pelvic exam. And that's really, to open up and see. But it's bad enough. But one of the things that he did was he would practice on slaves who did not undergo any anesthesia because it was believed that we could not feel pain. And he wrote a book about everything that he did. And so he was, I guess, so full of himself and proud of his accomplishments that he was able to describe, how the women would scream and how you would be able to endure that and then feel that they don't, or feel or think that they don't have pain is just beyond me. So that is one other reason. So Jordan, Taria says, welcome, Jordan. Great. And Taria says, I learned something today. Never knew that. Yeah. It's actually a museum here in Chicago that talks about a lot of the earlier techniques in medicine. It's absolutely fantastic. And so I would recommend, if you are ever in the Chicagoland area, to look up the, I want to say it's the Museum of Medical History. Now, last but not least, the example that I'm going to give is about Henrietta Lacks. And a lot of us have heard from the book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And basically, she was the first, or her cells was the first human living cell line. And what that means is when they collected her cell, whereas other cells would die in the petri dish, her cells actually not only lived, but they divided at a really fast rate. So what scientists have been able to do is utilize these cells because they come from human beings. They're able to do a lot of experiments. And so they have done a lot of advancements in medicine because of Henrietta Lacks. Now, the controversy comes in because she did not give consent for anyone to take her cells. And then her family did not benefit from any of the medical advancements that happened because of their descendants' cells being used. So it's very controversial. Now, they are trying to make up for it. They've done a lot of PR and they're building a building in her honor. They have created scholarships. I mean, so there are some things that are happening because of the outrage from learning exactly what happened with her. But there's reason for us not to trust. And so one of the things that I can say Well, you know what? Before I say that, Taria, you said that you could relate, but I want to know, and you learned something. I want to know, are you kind of unnerved about hearing about that information that happened, both with James Sims and also with Henrietta Lacks? I think everyone knows about the Tuskegee experiment, so I'm just curious about that. Put you in, yes, okay. You don't even have to abbreviate. You say yes, you can. Yeah, it really is unnerving. Now, what they say on their website for Henrietta Lacks is that not only are they doing all these things to try to pay back and serve the community, but they say that it was regular practice for them to take cells without having anyone's consent. So supposedly her cells weren't like any different than any other cells that they collected. But one of the things that they did as a result of the Tuskegee experiment in particular is they came up with a very regimented way that you are to conduct research using human beings. So if you are going to do research that incorporate people, it doesn't matter if you're even asking them a bunch of questions. They have a ethics board. It's called an institutional review board. And that is what they put in place to safeguard between these unethical practices. So even though they have put these safeguards up, nothing is ironclad and people are still distrustful. But the problem arises when you have situations where the advancements in science aren't necessarily tailored to us, right? And so Sydney on LinkedIn says, "Hi, Dr. Crystal. This is interesting because we just had a discussion about this for a class project." Yeah, I'm glad it's being discussed. But the ethics board really does help with that. But we still don't get the amount of representation that we need in science. And so there are some diseases that are tailored or that are higher for us as Black people. Most people have heard of sickle cell. Because of research that they've done in gene therapy, there is now some help. Now, nothing is 100% because we're all individually unique, but that is something that has a lot of promise. Blacks also are diagnosed with asthma more, and we're seeing more evidence of us having celiac disease when a while ago, like as early as like 5 years ago, a lot of people were like, oh, Black people don't get celiac disease. And that is not true. So there are things, I mean, one of the reasons why no one knew is because we don't participate in studies. And so people just thought that was something that was unique to a lot of European people of European descent instead of African descent. Now, Taria says, "I have come to realize that the field of medicine is not pretty." Yeah. "And most times we don't know what all goes into research." Yeah, it's true. "There are conversations about that now with the COVID vaccines and the lack of information/discussions of what is truly happening." Yeah, that's true. And there's so much misinformation out there, but that's a whole nother topic. Um, and I don't know what to do about that either, but thank you for sharing that, Taria. Now, the other thing that is specific to Black people is that we have a 1.5 to 2 times chance of having chronic diseases such as diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular disease, or even chronic lung disease. And so the Black community, we have a prevalence of that even higher than most. And that's a problem. I mean, we need to participate in the studies because when you don't have representation and you have a majority of Caucasians that are there, and there are differences in either our lifestyles or our environment, then those don't get factored in when it comes to testing these medications. And so we need to be a part of that, right? And so when it comes to hair, there are things that we also don't know. So there are some people that are more susceptible to ailments compared to others. For example, when I first went natural back in 2002 and 2003, when I grew my hair out, my method of growing it out was to wear cornrows. And so I would wear my hair back. I made sure they weren't tight, didn't have a problem with, pain. But unfortunately, and I believe I have this hypothesis, I have yet to see if it's true or not, but I believe based on some of the scalp conditions that I had, that it contributes to me having traction alopecia. And so I don't have it now, because the good thing about traction alopecia is after you lay off of what's causing it, then your hair can grow back. But I know that the perimeter of my hairline is more sensitive. And so I have a friend, and she has been wearing tight braids and weaves for as long as I've known her, for over 30 years. And she does not have a problem with traction alopecia at all. And so it makes me curious, what is her makeup that allows her to be able to withstand these tight styles? And then someone like me, where it's not tight at all, I can start seeing the traction alopecia come. And so we need to understand that more. And unfortunately, traction alopecia and also a disease called CCCA, central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia, these are more prevalent in the Black community, and we need to understand that more. We also need to understand why some treatments work for some and not for others. For example, if you go to the dermatologist for a scalp problem and you're losing your hair, some physicians will say, okay, you can use Rogaine and you should be okay. Some people respond to corticosteroids. And so there are different reactions, or the way that the body receives it, in a way that will stimulate or not stimulate. So we need to know more about that as well. And so to find out what is going on, there needs to be representation in research. And so many people ask, oh, you're a hair scientist, how did you become a hair scientist? And they want to know, what do you do in research? But in all honesty, and you probably know this, I am not the only one out there. And the good thing is that there are other ones coming. I am so happy that there are a lot of young people who are going into programs that focus in hair science in particular. And that representation will be there, because maybe if we start coming together and doing things for the people, people will feel more comfortable, because they would have a little bit more trust. And that's something that I experienced when I was at L'Oreal. And in all honesty, it crosses borders. So here in Chicago, a lot of people who participated in the studies that we had at the Institute, they felt relief that we were the ones that were there to take care of them. We ran the studies, they saw us, they saw the care, we explained things to them, and they were really happy about that. The other thing is, when I went overseas to do some studies there, it was like, even though we didn't necessarily have to speak the same language, the mere fact that I was there and I looked like them was very comforting. And they communicated that and said thank you a lot. And so I think representation is important. And so other scientists like me are usually working with other companies. And so I am doing this independently, but we got to get them trained up so that we can have this umbrella of assistance. So Taria says, yes, I love the work that you are doing. Glad to hear that more of us are stepping into the field. Yes, I am so as well. I am really happy about that. Now, I want to talk about some of the other research opportunities, because I talked about main insights and what my goal is. But there is something called the Silent, or an organization called the Silent Spring Institute. And that institute is helping to bring awareness, or doing studies to show correlations between what we do or what we experience environmentally and seeing how that has an impact on breast cancer in particular. There is also something similar with the Bench to Community initiative, and they also have the same uh, initiative, but what they want to do is focus on Black women in particular and Black hair care products and skin care products that could lead to uh, different ailments, particularly breast cancer. Now, there is a research project that they just completed, and I am still waiting to hear back because I want to have them here on the chat so they can talk about what they found in detail. So Sydney says that she agrees. Yes, thank you for that. The other research study that isn't as focused, but I think will help our community a lot is called the All of Us study. So the All of Us study is a 10-year study, and that's a initiative that I decided to participate in. I thought it was really neat because it's called All of Us because we aren't represented, and they want to make sure that they encompass all the different ethnic groups that are here in the United States. And so it's 10 years, and you can give them as much information as you're comfortable in giving them. And I'll talk about that a little later. So the other thing I want to talk about is the main insights collaborations. And so it's based on, personal experience of finding out that there are a lot of practitioners out there who notice what's going on. They see people on a, everyday basis, and there are some trends that they're seeing. And so I was like, if I could talk to hair practitioners and understand what they're seeing and try to translate that into my scientific lingo to see if it's a hypothesis there that could be further investigated, I think that's like the best of both worlds, right? And so that is something I'm passionate about, and that is like how Main Insights really works to partner with the hair practitioners so that they can help me collect the data. Now, one of the things that I experienced is, talking about observations, I've noticed one of the reasons why I'm a pretty good scientist is I notice a lot. So when I was getting my degree, I was supposed to be looking at some other phenomenon happen, but it was something that kept popping up consistently. And I was like, okay, I know I'm supposed to be looking at this, but what is this going on right here? And so that is actually what led me to get my degree. But one of the things that I've noticed, and a lot of people may know that I suffer from seborrheic dermatitis, which is a condition where the yeast Malassezia overproduces. And so it leads me to have a lot of flaking. And when I spoke earlier about my traction alopecia, I believe that I'm probably more susceptible to it because my seborrheic dermatitis was really bad around the perimeter of my hairline and right behind my ears. And when I started getting some thinning, those were the places where I started getting the thinning. So I believe that the seborrheic dermatitis, and this is only a hypothesis, but that observation is something that I questioned years ago, and I asked my physician if he thought that that was something that could be leading to the thinning. And at that time, he was like, no, haven't heard of that or anything like that. But then more recently, I found out that that could be something that contributes to hair thinning. So now we're learning more, and that is something that people are taking a closer look at. Like, okay, so somebody says, so I'm an upcoming senior working on next steps. I want to participate in textured hair science, and I plan on applying to grad school in cosmetic science. But most campuses and facilities don't have much experience or knowledge in hair. So what is your recommendation? That's an excellent question. There are some universities like the University of Toledo, the University of Cincinnati that have cosmetic science focuses. So it's usually in their, what is it? I want to say it's in pharmaceutical sciences. So it's not called, well, if you do cosmetic science studies, those should come up and you should be able to find some programs that work in it. Now, I would say that you have to approach that with caution, because what I have found is they have promised students that, oh yeah, you can have a project and work on hair. And then once the student gets there, because one, hair is difficult to study, and two, a lot of the focus or the funding comes in from skin studies. A lot of the students get kind of sidetracked into more skin studies and not hair studies. And that's a shame, because there are so many hair studies that can be done. So I would just, do your homework with that. Now, the other thing I want to say is, even though there are programs that are focused to get people who are interested in cosmetic science to go into those programs, you don't have to go into a program like that to get the, I'll say, skills necessary to study hair science. Because if you go into chemical engineering, if you go into mechanical engineering, chemistry, biology, even physics, that will give you the background to be able to do hair science. And that's really what it's about, learning the technical aspects of research and then tailoring it towards what you want to do. And I think I'm going to, because I've been asked about this before, I think I'm going to have a segment where I talk about the different paths and options and things you need to look out for more in depth. So Nadia, thanks for coming. And Facebook user says, love it. So thank you. And Nadia says, yes, thank you. So I was talking about how I was losing my hair. I asked if there was a correlation between my seborrheic dermatitis and my hair loss. But we need to understand that more. And so that is one of the reasons why we need to participate. And so in my field, and I mentioned this in a different episode and segment, I talked about how I feel that as scientists, sometimes we tend to be elitist and think that we have all the answers without appreciating some of the experiences of what hair practitioners, what they have gone through and what they actually have to say. And so I'm really sensitive towards that and appreciate it, and know that we should not be working in silos. We need to build those bridges across medicine, basic science, and also the practitioner who's out there in the field. So I'm curious, is there anyone who resonates with that, about the fact that we need to have more collaborations? Because I am just tired of not having representation from us, even though it's coming, but we got to get trained up. But we don't have a lot of representation within the areas outside of those who work in corporate America. So, and I was one of those. I had great experiences and would not change it for the world. But now it's time for us to be able to take control, but also talk about the results without having the, I'll say, hindrance of corporate looking over us and saying what you can and cannot do, because they want to have the intellectual propriety of doing with the information what they want to make more money. All right. And so I want to talk about how we need to overcome mental barriers for the betterment of hair research in particular. Because even though there's reason for us to be either afraid or apprehensive, we need to benefit from research. But by benefiting, we have to participate as well. And so I want to talk about three main things that you can do to overcome that and to help us in the plight of learning more about hair care, or the effects of products and treatments and all the processes that we do with the hair. So number one, I want you to try to find someone or an organization that you can trust. And so I spoke earlier about the Bench to Community initiative, which really focuses on breast cancer for women of African descent. And then I also talked about the Spring Institute that also has an initiative to look at how cancer is brought about from different environmental factors and also culture. But then Yolanda Lindsay, Dr. Yolanda Lindsay, who is a prominent board certified dermatologist, has funding for research. And so she's going to have that need. And she is a woman of African descent. And so if you are looking to partner with someone who can relate to you, who looks like you, has the same experiences, then you can look her up as well. And of course, last but not least, Main Insights, I also do research. And I want to do stuff that is relatively like easy and low hanging fruit, right? So I have a hair collection study because in order to study hair and to find out how it is responsive to different treatments, I have to have lots of hair samples to understand that. So if I am someone that you can trust, then I more than invite you to come either be a part of it by collecting the hair if you are a barber in particular, or if you're a hairstylist and you know someone who's like, you know what, I'm going to cut all my hair off. Like I would be the perfect candidate if I wanted to cut my hair. You know, I have my hair that's more than 5 inches long. It is curlier and I have scalp issues. I mean, so it's a whole lot of things that someone like me could benefit from the study. Now, the other thing that you can do is take baby steps, baby steps. So a lot of times we get scared because we're like, oh my God, a clinical trial. So maybe it's going to be more invasive and they may have to give you a shot or injections. So just don't participate in that. So you don't have to participate in that type of a clinical trial where it's more invasive. You can do something like answer simple questionnaires about what you've done. And then what you experience. I mean, a lot of that information is important as well. You can also provide samples. For example, I was talking about hair samples. I mean, it's not a whole lot that I can do with, hair samples. It's not like I'm poking you or anything. It's just cutting the hair, which is something you probably would do anyway. And then also only participate in studies where they de-identify the data. And that is something that goes along with that, the ethics board that I was talking about, the institutional review board that makes sure that there's nothing nefarious going on, right? Now, the third thing I want to talk about is you can learn about yourself along with the researcher. So I spoke earlier about the All of Us study, which is a study that incorporates what you want to tell them. So if you want to just give them information and answer questionnaires, you can do that. If you want to answer questionnaires and have them have access to your medical records, then you can do that. Or if you want to take it even a step further and go and have them look at your DNA, your medical history. I mean, it's a 10-year study. And so you don't have to have them do everything. You can opt out of some. And so what you may feel comfortable with would still be beneficial. So that is something that you can do. I mentioned earlier that I collaborate with Stylists. And so some of the research that I do is based on that collaboration, them providing services, but allowing the service provider to share the information about the results that we're getting in research. So that is something that you can do. Is there any comments or any concerns about anything that I've said so far? I know that Samai and Sydney and Nadia, and then someone on Facebook also is there, whose name I can't see. Hey, Nicole, I didn't see that you said that. You say, let me see, totally agree. That's a factor. Oh, okay. Nadia, you're probably talking about the seborrheic dermatitis. Nicole, that's great. Sydney, you says that's a good question. Samaya says, right, that's your concern. What are my thoughts about holistic health education? Ooh, that's an excellent question. I think any education is, who could say anything bad about just educating yourself? So I'm definitely an advocate for holistic health education. And I don't think enough people pay attention to that. Now, so there are two ways that you can describe holistic based on what I have noticed. Holistic can be that you take different parts and different approaches. So you have that holistic perspective. So you're addressing something internally, you're addressing it externally, you're also maybe incorporating a spiritual aspect. So that could be holistic. Or some people say holistic is, oh, I'm not going to have you interact with any chemicals, is what a lot of people say. And I cannot stand that because the air you breathe is a chemical and the water that you drink is a chemical. But holistic can mean you stay away from drugs, but you have to be like really careful with that because some things that are natural can be very bad for you. There are people who are sensitive to things that are natural, like gluten or nuts. And there are some essential oils that people are sensitive to. That would be me. And so when you say, oh, just because it's natural, it's going to be good, that's not always true. So you have to know thyself as well. But having that education is good. You have to be careful about who you're learning it from. And anyone who has had any interaction with me knows that when it comes to education, I believe in having it based on research. So if I'm not able to say that there's a difference between what I experience and then something that's based on an accumulation of evidence and you can actually have a reference to it, then that is what I advocate for. So health education that's holistic is great, but you got to make sure that you're getting it in a way that you can receive it. It does, a lot of people just are able to regurgitate things that sound good, but it's an art to education, I think. Mimi Hawkins, Facebook user. Oh, okay. Thanks for identifying yourself. Taria says, find an organization you can trust. Thank you for spelling that out. Can you spell her name in the chat? Whose name? Oh boy. So, Samai, can you please specify who her is? I apologize that I don't know who she is. I guess I've moved on too much to remember what I was saying. What is her name? Okay. Maybe someone else can tell me what it is that her is. Who was I talking about? I had to have been talking about someone for someone to say that. Oh, Dr. Yolanda Lindsay. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. The dermatologist. Okay, that's who you're talking about. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see. What would be a suggestion for someone who would want to start their own research on Black hair, but maybe have not the funding for it? Oh, excellent question. Oh, if I knew the answer to that, I would not be really advocating for people to participate in research because I'd be able to fund it and be able to pay people. Yeah, that's a difficult question. One of the things that I would say in terms of options, there are all, so when you get your credentials and you're able to segment yourself as an expert, there are lots of corporations who would love to get more information on how to do things and have ideas. The thing about that is that it's usually within the confines of that particular organization. And sometimes when you share information with the organization, they say that it's owned by them. So you have to be really careful about what you share and how you share it. That's one of the reasons why with with Maine Insights and the Our Black Hair Matters initiative and the movement that I have is I don't want those constraints. I want to be able to share anything that I learn with the population. So you have to be really careful with those type of partnerships if that is an option. Of course, there is funding. Unfortunately, hair science isn't one that is well respected with the big players out there who are paying for like health related issues. So it's kind of hard to get that funding. So I wish I could help you a little bit more. Facts on the chemical perspective. Yes, facts on the chemical perspective, I think is absolutely necessary and understudied. But the one thing that I do want to do before I leave, and I know time has really gone by fast, but one of the things I wanted to do is kind of talk about the pillars that I have for the Our Black Hair Matters movement, because it's important for us, I believe, to raise awareness of Black hair care issues and supporting those who need them. That is one of the reasons why I feel that there has to be a platform for us. I think we can relate and show compassion where it's needed. Also, I feel that, I talked about collaboration. So, working together as a people to understand Black hair and the effects of lifestyle, the environment, and genetics. So, I was talking about Dr. Yolanda Lindsay and talking about some of the research that she's done. And I know that she has participated in research that showed that CCCA, that central centrifugal cicatricial alopecia, that we get with the hair loss that's here in the crown, they have found that there is a genetic component to that. So that is extremely important. We want to elevate the industry by conducting research and leveraging the power of technology and scientific advancements. I have said on episodes in the past that technology is there for us to know a whole lot more than we do. And there is a book, I should have brought it in here, but it's called The Secret Body, and it's by Davis is his last name, Daniel Davis. Daniel Davis is a researcher in the UK, and he wrote this book called The Secret Body. I cannot recommend it more. I mean, it's an easy read. It's absolutely fascinating. But it's those types of advancements in technology that we have the access to. And unfortunately, we aren't doing anything with it. And so it's about elevating the industry by utilizing these new techniques. But the other thing I want to do is challenge the product manufacturers, because unfortunately, there is a problem with getting the hair for them to do research, just like it's a problem for me to get the hair to do the research. And they aren't able to make claims based on our hair. And when I say our hair, I know that there is a spectrum of different curl degrees, right? And so when you have tightly coiled hair, it behaves differently than a looser curl. So along the spectrum, we need to understand every aspect of it. So I want to challenge those manufacturers who aren't able to show data, because it's all about the data, that it works on our hair. And then sharing the research finding, which goes to your question, Sydney, about research and getting funding. Is necessary for people to be empowered with information so you can make informed decisions. So that is the aspect of the movement. And that is why I am wanting to do everything that I can to make sure that we work together in that vein. So I want to make sure there aren't any other questions before I close. I'm definitely here for you for that. All right, so you have to go. I understand. Thank you so much for joining. So in closing, if you watched the replay, be sure to post your comments and questions. Also, if you are one of many who need help in finding a vetted hair professional, you can go to links.maininsights.com/appointment to make sure that you sign up for a complimentary 15-minute consultation. But you can also participate in research, and you can see you can serve your clients while helping out in research by going to my website, maininsights.com, and there's a tab called Hair Research. You can fill out the form that says, let's chat, and then we can schedule an appointment. But with that, if you are someone who wants to contribute your hair towards science, you can also get paid for that contribution, and you can go to links.maininsights.com/curly hair. And thank you so much for your attention. Really appreciate it. Just remember that our Black hair matters. And as always, take care and love your hair. Bye-bye.